What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over something very cool. We're going to be going over level streaming. Now, level streaming as a whole has quite a few things that it entails. So level streaming really means that you can go between certain scenes, areas of the game, seamlessly, where, you know, things are still moving, maybe music is still playing while you're playing the game. And so, you know, when we do like open level, like if we were to do this, where I confirm my character and I choose the random stage here. Now it's going to load, and it's going to load one of my random levels that I have. It's actually going to load the, of course it loaded the level that is not ready with character setups and all right now. But anyway, you could see how the game froze when I loaded the level because we called the open level function, and that's what we've been using to this point. What it does is it completely changes out the level that is loaded and loads all the assets separately. So to do that, it has to unload the current level and load this level in. Well, that is good for hard transitions and anytime you want to do that, or for simply changing levels when needed. However, it's not so good for level streaming. In fact, it's not good at all for level streaming. It's not really streaming at all. It's actually just, again, changing the levels. So let's open this again, and let's try something else out. Now, I don't have a loading screen in here, and that's one of the things we'll have to cover. But let's say I open this first level. Now, it was pretty seamless. In fact, it was faster than open level, to be honest. But we loaded our characters into this level using level streaming, and we successfully avoided any sort of lag or stoppage. We could have been playing music. We could have been playing an animated loading symbol because we successfully streamed in this level. So right now, what we're covering in today's episode is going from level to level using level streaming. There is more we have to do. We have to add load screens. That'll be a separate episode. And we need to show how we can load in specific objects as well, because we may not want to load in the entire level as a whole, but instead have references to objects that we're going to load in at some point. And what that will solve is when we're on our character select screen at the very start here, you see how we switch back between these characters, and sometimes things like the lighting renders on them when they spawn, or maybe they're low res when you initially go over them. And you don't see that so much here, just because my computer so far is fast enough to render it quickly. However, it can definitely spawn in and be low res because it hasn't fully textured yet. And this will happen usually if I change, like you see how I changed materials and it had to take a second to kind of populate that. That's what the other part of level streaming is, where we can stream in specific objects and spawn them in when we want to. So we have quite a bit of level streaming stuff to handle as a whole, but today we're going to just be talking about streaming the actual levels. So I don't want that to be confusing. I know we had some confusion with the input buffer system because I couldn't quite think of what to call everything, since they all had similar names and they all did refer to other parts of the systems. So this specifically is level streaming, where we're going from one level to the next without using open level, but literally streaming the entire level in. And that's what we're going to be covering today. So it's going to be a bit of a weird one because we've never touched anything with this in the series before. So it's going to be a little bit different than what we're probably used to. However, it's actually not so bad. I did try to set up things when I could that would make our lives not too hard when we switch over to level streaming. So I don't think it'll be a huge difference. Anyway, let's hop into it today. So before we get started on our changes, if you do want to catch up in the series and be able to do everything we're doing here, I'll leave the playlist to all 92 episodes, I believe, before this episode right here, top right corner. You can click on it and get caught up. Otherwise, I will leave the level select episode right here in this iCard if you'd like to get caught up on how we actually choose what level we're going to. All right, so there's a few things we're going to need today, and one is going to be a new level. One is going to be our base character BP, and then we'll need each of our level blueprints for each level, and our default game mode BP. We will, of course, need our level select screen or wherever it is that we're going to be going to the level as well, But I'll get to that a little bit later because I'm actually going to do a live demo on that one just to kind of show you how we can add new levels while we're there. Because I think that's easier shown than explained. All right. So the way this works is we're going to make a new level. You can keep all the levels you already have. We're still going to use them. They're not useless or anything, but we're going to stream them in. And to do that, we need something called a persistent level. Now, it's not actually different from a regular level. A persistent level is just the name that everyone uses, at least the standard name that I'm used to hearing, where this is the level that persists as we do all the streaming. It's the level in the background, and we have these other levels inside of it. And we choose which ones we want to stream in and out. So right now you're looking at side-scroller example map, but we're not actually in that map. We are in a map called persistent level that has these other levels in it. The way this works is, and I'll save all so that all this stuff can get fixed. I believe that's all lighting data. So I go ahead and go to my levels folder and I add a new level. Now, I already have one. It's this. You don't have to do anything special with it, so I'm not going to do it. Just call it whatever you want. I recommend persistent level or just something so that you're aware of what we're using it for. Now, when you first go into it, you're not going to have anything in here. It's going to be a completely black level. Depending on your engine version, there might be some lighting or something like that, but it's going to be pretty much empty in here. When we do this, we're going to do something we've never done before and go to Window, Levels. It's going to pop up this little window here. I like to drag it next to my world outliner, but you can use it in that little window if you want. And it should look like this, where it says persistent level. So what this is this is the list of levels that are in this level that you're in. So you can have a level and you can have sub-levels under it that we can stream in or out. And essentially, we're going to have all the levels that we want to be shown at the current time streamed in, and we want to unstream or stream out all the levels that are not currently shown or used. So as an example, I have persistent level, and we know for a fact we are going to want our main menu. That'll be the first thing. We also are going to want our other characters or our other levels that we can go to, such as our actual stages. So if I open this up, you see I have levels in here. Now the way you get levels in here is if you click on the down arrow where it says levels, you can create a new level or add existing. We already made a lot of our levels in this series, so for now I'm just going to do add existing. One that I did was main menu, and then I also did my side scroller example map. Now, again, I'll give you a live demo later where we show this entire process. I'll add in a new map and all that stuff. But for now, just go ahead and add one map or two maps, probably a main menu and a stage to go to, and we'll work with that. Now, you don't have to do anything specific with these once they're in here. You can leave them alone for now. This just gets them in. So you'll see that this will put everything in the level. There's my main menu stuff up above, and I've just moved this down here so that I could separate it. So if I really wanted to, show you that this is what you're used to seeing, the main menu stuff. These are where my actors spawn for the character select screen. Those are my little stages that I had set up that we no longer need to use, by the way, since we are going to be putting in level streaming, and these levels will actually be in here, but I'll leave that alone for now. So you have your main menu and your side scroller example map. Again, theoretically, we're going to have all of our levels in here, or at least all the levels that we can reach from this destination. Okay, so I've put in the main menu and side scroller example map, as I said a bunch. Now, when you look in your world outliner, you will actually see everything for the levels that are selected. So if I just go to main menu, you'll see less than the side scroller example map if I take away the eyes. And you can see that the lighting changes and everything like that. So this is what my actual persistent level looks like. Then I can have just the main menu with less items in it, or I can have the side scroller example map and the main menu with more items in it. All right. Now, a lot of this actually is going to happen in the level blueprints. We haven't done a lot with this yet, but it's going to be really useful here because the levels themselves are going to be what's streaming in and out. So this is where the level blueprints really come in handy. So first of all, let's go to our persistent level. Go to blueprints, open level blueprint, and we'll check that one out. This one is very simple for me. Now, we may want to have screens before this, so, you know, when you launch the game, we may want to have a splash screen or something that plays before this. We'll worry about that later. For now, let's assume we want to launch the main menu just like we have been, or really the press any key menu just like we have been when the game starts. That's what we'll assume for now, and that's how we'll handle it for now. So all I've done is in persistent level in my begin play event, then I've done something called load stream level. And this is a default Unreal function that allows us to stream in a level, assuming that we can give it a level name. Make sure make visible after load is checked, because you can stream something in and not make it visible right away. That's useful for what I mentioned earlier, where you can have object references or entire levels like this that don't stream in until they're fully rendered and or fully ready to be rendered and their textures are ready. That way you don't get that sort of low res going on. But in this case, since this is just a widget and all the main menu data, I do want to make it visible immediately, and also because this is the first thing that we will be seeing, so I don't want to be looking at just a black screen. I'd rather just render this right away. So make it visible after load, and we give it the name of the level. Now, it has to be a sub-level to my knowledge. There may be other ways around it, but just to be safe, just make sure you're picking a sub-level here. That way it knows where to pull from. And so we want the main menu in this case, but whatever your name is here on the level is what's going to go in the level name here. So main menu for me. Now, when it's completed, we want to do something. We want to perform an event or perform some logic. So before we had in the main menu level blueprint, we were doing some logic. And the way you can access this now is if you go to blueprints, level blueprints, sub-levels, and then you can edit the individual blueprints. Now you'll notice this is the same level blueprint, at least this stuff right here, that I've had in the past for the main menu. Okay, so it's the same level blueprint we've been working in, but we're going to add a little bit of new functionality now. So this is my testing method to skip directly to the character select screen for when I'm testing. That way I don't have to go through the press any key screen every time. So don't worry about that. However, this was on begin play before. We were doing begin play, creating the press any key screen, and then adding that to the viewport. And that's still perfectly fine how it is. But we don't want to do this on begin play anymore. If we did this on begin play, this would pop up without any sort of streaming occurring. So for what I've done is I've just gotten rid of the begin play. Just like that. Instead, I've made a custom event that I can call once the level streaming has completed. So add custom event. When you click it, it'll make one of these red nodes, and then you can rename it either by right-clicking and rename or by choosing the name up here. And I've called it load main menu. The name doesn't matter, just as long as you know what you're doing. You could say load press any key screen widget. Doesn't matter. It just really means that we're going to start the main menu logic here. We're going to create this stuff when this event is called. And we're going to do that from the persistent level once the main menu level has been streamed in. Again, if you did it on begin play in the level blueprint, it would either A, do it when the main menu was spawned, which means that it would happen before the persistent level streamed it in, which would be wrong, or B, it would not have the proper data needed to actually perform that action yet, and then you would get errors. So we don't want to do it on begin play. We want to do it on this load main menu event. So there's something we can do called remote event. And look what it says. Tries to find an event named event name on all other levels and calls it. So this is specific for levels. This is how we can interact with levels and call events on other levels. That way we can interact between the two, because before we had no way of doing that other than storing data in our game instance and passing it along, which is still useful, but we don't want to do it for everything. We don't want to bloat our game instance. So what we can do is just call an event in another level when we are ready. So long story short, we load stream level of the level we're going to go to. We call remote event, which is literally remote event. Target is self. That's fine. It's coming from this level script, this level blueprint. And then the event name it's looking for is load main menu. Now, as it says, it will call this on all other levels. So if you have this event in multiple places, it'll call that. So make sure that if it's something that you don't want to happen on multiple levels, that you call it for the proper event. So load main menu does my standard press any key screen and add to viewport. Again, nothing new there. While we're here, we can go ahead and do this logic. It won't really do anything yet because we have plenty more that we need to update. But in our main menu level blueprint, I've also made an event called load level. So this is how we're going to go from our main menu level to one of our actual stages, like our side scroller example map or the temple that we have or the furnace, any of those levels. We're going to stream from the main menu level to that level, just the same way that we're doing it here. So this event load level is coming from a blueprint interface. And the reason it is coming from a blueprint interface is we may need to call it somewhere that is not a level blueprint. In this case, we're going to be calling it from our stage select or our level select widget. And to do that, to interact with a level blueprint, the only way I know of is to have either an object that can call it, which we don't have an object. In this case, it's kind of just an overarching topic like the level blueprint, or a higher entity such as the game world or game instance that can call this. Again, we don't really do any of that here. We just want to call it from a widget. Or to have something like an interface that we implement and then can call functions on it. So I've decided to put in an interface, and I'll show you how to make that right now. I went to Blueprints, Functional BPs, and we've made some before. However, we've never really made one for this purpose, so I'll show you how we're going to do it. You go Add New, Blueprints, and Blueprint Interface here. As it says, these are name-only, no implementation functions that you make in here. So once you make one, call it whatever you want. I called it Level Streaming Interface because I will be putting my future functions related to level streaming in here as well. So as it said, you don't define logic in here. There's no logic in here. It makes it available for you to interact between two objects, such as our level select widget and our main menu level blueprint, to call a function between them. The logic is then defined in wherever it's being handled. So you will have a function by default when you come in here. You can rename it, and then you can also add new functions right here. So I called it load level, and I've given it an input of name. So if you add a new parameter, choose name as the type, and call it level name, you'll look like this, and that's all you need to do for this level streaming interface. So what this does is allow us to call this load level function and pass in a name, and then we'll use that name in the corresponding handlers, such as the main menu, to determine what level we're going to stream to. Now, one thing we do need to do is the class or object that is going to be handling this event. Handling it, not necessarily calling it or triggering it, but handling it is the one that needs to have the interface implemented. So if you go to your main menu level blueprint and click on class settings, you'll have this interfaces section, and then you can go ahead and hit add, and I've already done it so it won't be in my list, but you can choose your interface. Mine is called level streaming interface. So I would click it and it would go right here. At that point, I can actually get this event and prepare to handle it. So the way you get the event, because there's a few different ways that it'll pop up when you type in the name. So if I said event load level, it'll pop up right away, just like that, event load level. But if you just type load level, then you'll get the function call, you'll get the load level interface call, and the event load level. You want the event here. That's the handle. We'll talk about one of these other ones when we are actually calling it and triggering it. Again, this isn't going to do anything yet because we're not going to be calling this event yet. You'll see that when we get to the level select. But the way this works is we have the level name parameter. So we're going to call our old friend load stream level again and pass in the level name. So essentially, say we select the second stage on the level select, then we know the name of the level that is tied to. So we pass the level in and it's going to start loading that level. I did do make visible after load here. Although when we put in load screens, this will change a little bit. We'll be actually putting the load screen there, or maybe an object or a widget that plays and shows progress as it's loading, and then we'll actually load to the level. Okay? Something additional I've done here, it's actually not necessary the way we've handled it correctly, but I've done this for the time being because we are going to be updating our main menu to work with some of the level streaming a little bit more. So remember I said earlier about spawning in the objects and making sure they're fully rendered before displaying them. Again, that's a common thing to do in games, to to have these references that you check if they're loaded or not. So until we have that, our widgets are still going to be on the screen because we've not actually told anything to remove them. We can unstream the level, but the widgets themselves are actually different. If the widgets are being added to, say, the persistent level, they're being added to the main menu level, which is part of the persistent level, then those widgets will actually continue on till our actual levels now. So before, when we would call open level, it would get rid of them even if we didn't manually do it. So what I'm doing before we have more functionality in for that sort of stuff that, again, we'll talk about in another episode, all I'm doing is forcibly removing our character select and our level select widgets just to make sure that they do not pop up as we stream levels. Technically, you could leave this anyway. New ones get created when we go back to the main menu, so it won't really hurt anything to remove them every time, just to be sure that they never pop up on the actual level themselves. So it's up to you if you want to keep this or not. For now, it's definitely a good idea. That way you don't have it in your way. So I just get all widgets of class right here, and I do it for the level select screen. And I get the first index, or index 0, and then I call remove from parent. So literally get a copy, drag off of that, and remove from parent. And then I do the same thing for character select. I use index 0 because we are pretty diligent when we're going through our main menu to make sure there's only one character select screen or one level select screen up ever. So I shouldn't have to loop through this unless I have bugs in my other logic. So if you do this and you still see one of them up, that means you have more than one of these screens up, which is a bug elsewhere to be solved. But you can go ahead and remove them both. I also go ahead and destroy our main menu camera. Again, not technically necessary. We could just change the view target. However, when we go back to the main menu, and this will make more sense when we cover more of the level streaming because, again, I have more to show with it. But when we go back to the main menu, I want to create a new camera, or rather, re-access the camera from the streamed in level. So to do that, I'm going to need to keep references to these cameras and switch between them when we switch levels, which is fine. It makes sense. But we actually don't currently do any of that. We just automatically possess that one camera and allow it to allow the widgets to play all the logic for the main menu. And so because of that, it won't exactly look right if we have the camera still active and available when we are trying to play our game, when we stream into one of those levels. So for now, I go ahead and destroy this camera. Again, another thing that may change as we do more of the level streaming episodes. So don't think, oh, this is what I have to do. This is just what I'm doing so we can get this part done. And then when we go to the next part of level streaming, we may take this node out. We may not need this anymore. Okay? And so the way you do this is, you see it says default camera from main menu. If you try and look this up, you might not find it. Sometimes you will. It actually depends on a few things. It could be here in your list. But for sublevels, for me, it's usually not. I don't know if it's specific to sublevels or not. But what I do, just to be safe every time, and to leave nothing up to interpretation, I go to my world outliner and I find the object that I actually want. So I have two default cameras. I have one that actually goes to the main menu and one that goes to the side-scroller example map. I've technically tagged the one with the side-scroller example map gameplay camera so that I'm aware, although I don't technically do anything with it in the code right now because of what I mentioned earlier. We're not entirely done with it yet, and so I didn't feel like putting in a hack for it. But I do know this is the one that's going to this map, so the one that I actually want to get rid of is this one. Another way you can check is by getting rid of your side-scroller example map, clicking the eye, and then looking for default camera. You'll only have one. So you can drag this into, literally click and drag it into where you want, like the main menu, and release. And you'll get a reference to any object in that level in your level blueprint. I'm going to save these. Kind of get this away, and I'm also going to re-enable my side-scroller example map. Okay, And all I've done after that is called destroy actor on it. All right. Then I do something else where I call it remote event, and I look for the event name level loaded. So this is load level. I have level loaded, which is going to be in the levels themselves, the stages themselves that we are fighting on. So we'll get to that in a second. Just know that that's what this is doing. It's going to search for those and call the level loaded. And then we're going to unload the stream level from main menu. So literally unload stream level. And then you put in the level name of the level we're unloading. We're unloading our main menu. We don't need the main menu stuff up anymore. We don't need it streamed in. We only care about the levels that we care about, that we are going to be seeing. And we're not going to be seeing the main menu anymore after we switch levels and go to one of the stages. At least not until we choose to return to it. All right, so I'll come back to this in a second for reminding you of that event, but that's the main logic for level streaming out of the way. Everything we did there is pretty much good. However, we need to do one more thing with the stages themselves. So currently, again, I'm only doing the one stage. So if we go to another sub-level, like the side-scroller example map, you can see that before I didn't have anything in the level blueprint. Now, I don't need begin play in here. I never had anything in there, but I still don't need it, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And instead, I'm going to make a custom event called level loaded, and then I'm going to do the logic that I need to do here. So what we need to change now with our current logic is how we call the game mode logic. So in our default game mode BP, don't worry, we don't have a lot of changes. We have a lot of stuff in here that will need to be adjusted in the future, but we'll get there when we get there. Currently, all I'm doing now is just taking event begin play again off. Okay, this is where we go through. We spawn all of our players. We set our camera that's in use. We set everything that we need for our game mode. Okay. But that was happening on begin play. Well, in our project settings, you know, default game mode BP is our default game mode. So when we start up the project or when we stream in a level, begin play is going to play, but it's going to play earlier than we want. It's not going to fit in line with the other logic that we have now that we're changing the streaming. So what I've done yet again, remove begin play, add a new custom event, and I've called it level streamed in. And I've just put it to where begin play was. Literally that simple. And then when you go back to your stage blueprints, like this is my side scroller example map, stage. I get the game mode, I cast it to our type, and I call the event on it. I call it when level loaded gets hit. Remember that event I was telling you earlier? Level loaded. This is the event we're calling from the main menu when we get the event load level called, which is the last piece that we need to figure out where we're calling that, which then calls level loaded on the corresponding level. Unstreams the main menu. Then we go to the stage itself and says, okay, this level's been streamed in. Let's trigger the game mode logic. So we call it level streamed in, which then goes into the game mode BP, which then goes into what was previously begin play of the game mode. Now, I know that's a lot and probably a little bit confusing. It's going to be confusing the first time. But again, I try to make it as painless as possible with the systems we already had in place. All right. Now, we have a few fixes we have to do in our base character BP. Not a lot, but a few. Simply because of the way we previously had everything set up. It worked before without level streaming, but again, level streaming does change a few things in the way we have to handle it. Not so much the logic with our character, but specifically with what happens when they get spawned. So again, their begin play logic. And now, what we want to do is figure out where our last event is. Remember I said in our main menu level blueprint, we have this event load level. that we need to handle, and we're not actually calling it anywhere yet. Well, let's go fix that up. So if we go to our blueprints, widgets, and wherever you put it, for me, I put it in my level select screen widget. Now this part actually is not finished yet. This is part of what I'm going to do as the live demo, and I probably won't do every stage, but I mean I will in the back end. But where we don't actually need to know really anything about the stage select screen, other than we need to know where it is, what selection the user has chosen. So in the past, and I've kept the logic down here, what we were doing is we had this confirmed P1 selection, which gets set when player 1 or whatever player is assigned to player 1 in the game goes ahead and clicks the confirm button, literally clicks the button that's on the screen, or presses a valid key. For me, it's one on the numpad is basically the confirm button. So when I press 1, I say, okay, I've locked in my choice. And once I've locked in my choice, then I go ahead and open the corresponding level to the selection I picked. And that all lines up with the menu. That's all covered in the stage select, level select episodes. However, we don't want to call open level anymore. Remember, this is not a streamed level, so it won't work with our current system. I mean, technically it would work, but it won't stream that level, so no point in really doing that still. Instead, what we want to do is set some sort of variable that we know how to pass in the level name. The reason we set this variable is because the game instance will then know what the next level to stream in is. This isn't going to be too useful for now because we could just pass in a level name and load the level. However, when we're streaming a level in, we could have potentially several levels that we want to stream at the same time, or before a load is finished. Like say we want to stream 20 different actors in particular before we actually show the level to the user, or show maybe a cutscene or a rendered rendition of something. If we want to do that, we should know what it is that we're loading. So I've put a variable in the game mode, or excuse me, the game instance to keep track of this. It's not required that you do this for this episode, but I am going to do it just to kind of show you how it is. So we actually don't have an instance or a reference to the game instance in the level select screen. At least I did not in the tutorial series. It's very easy to get one. So if you'd like to do this now, I call get game instance, cast it to the game instance that I have set up in my project, and then drag off of this, promote it to a variable, and call it game instance reference. I do it right at the beginning of the event construct, just in case there's anything else I want to keep track of when I am on the screen. Like maybe I want to keep track of if it's an alpha or a mega stage. I know in a fighting game that doesn't really apply. However, it could be useful. For example, if I want to have stage hazards on or off, I could keep track of that sort of thing as well in the loading settings for the game instance. So I go ahead and do this here. And then the only time I use it is at the end when the player has pressed the continue button or the confirm button, as we've spoken about and shown before in the series. Now I'm going to move this a little bit closer. But what's going on here is I get my game instance reference. I right click on it and convert it to a validated get. And then when I drag my line in, only if this is valid do I perform the corresponding logic. If it's not valid, we need to post an error or figure out what is going on there. Then I have the same switch statement I had previously. I check confirm P1 selection to see what choice they actually made. And I'm going to set a variable in here. So we don't currently have this, so let's update it. In our base game instance.h code class, we made this a long time ago. Haven't touched it in some time. I've added an fname variable called level to load. I made sure that it was all U property, blueprint, read, write, edit anywhere, so that we could set the value and grab it. Okay. And of course, you will have to close the editor if you're running it like me to make sure that it builds, but play it again, open it back up. And then when you get back in here, you can set this value now. And I usually try and make this a little bit neater. It's hard with the switch statement just because of how tall the node actually is, but something like that. So I drag off game instance reference and set level to load, and then I put in the corresponding name. I'm still hard coding the name because at this point it doesn't really matter. I know where the levels are on the stage select, and if I ever need to change them, then I can manually change the names as well. It's not like the users are going to be changing around where they are, and if they are, that's something else we can cover, far down the line. But usually the stages should be in the exact same spot that they always have been, and so hard coding the name is perfectly fine here. Now lastly, I call load level. It's important to know load level is our interface function that we made in level streaming interface. You will see that if I go to my class settings, which actually pops up down here for some reason, I don't implement that interface. You don't have to do that to perform a call on it, but you do need to have an object that can perform the call on it. Our level is going to be what's performing the call, or at least receiving the call. So we can actually get the level separately, and we don't need to implement this interface. So get streaming level. And then you put in the name of the level. Again, I hard code here, but it's not a problem. This is only ever going to be part of my main menu level. If I change the levels around and maybe I have multiple streamed levels in the main menu, like the character selector or the stage selector, separate levels within the main menu, well, then I just put the corresponding name. It's not going to be dynamic. If I end up changing it, it's going to be a manual change that I make in the engine, and thus I can just update the name. So main menu is the level it comes from. I drag off of this and call load level, and I want load level message. Message is the one where you actually trigger the event on the interface. And then I pass in my level name from my game instance, or if you're skipping the game instance for now, that's fine. Just put in your level name right here. Perfect. And at this point, you're actually good with all your events. You can probably stream in the level fine, but you will have some issues with your characters, which I'll cover in a second. If you'd like, go ahead and add other levels now. You'll see it gets a little bit more complex because we're adding in more. That's why I'm going to do it at the end, but it won't really hurt anything. It's just that you'll have a bunch more levels, and you'll have to replicate this logic for all of them, which is why I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm doing one for now. Choose random stage, by the way, just a heads up. Still uses the open level logic, so this will also need to be adjusted. It can be adjusted the exact same way. Off this switch statement, you know what level it is that you want to choose to open, so just set the game instance variable and call load level on it. It's pretty much the exact same, except it's using the random integer as opposed to this integer. Okay, and with all that done, we're pretty much good, like I said, with the actual level streaming portion. But let's go back and fix up some of the issues that'll come up from our current systems, specifically just our character. There may be others, but I was not able to find any. So specifically with our character, because of the way that we spawn. So in our game mode, we spawn characters and we possess them. And of course, that's perfectly fine. That's how we should do it. When we go into begin play, it was currently going through and setting the player 2 reference here for our keyboard mode. So keyboard mode is where we control multiple characters from one device, like a keyboard or an arcade panel. And that way we can play with multiple characters on one device as opposed to separate devices. Because of this, some of you may be more familiar with this method, and you may have this in your begin play instead. These are different methods that I tried because for some reason this did not work for everyone right off the bat. I'm not sure if this is a timing issue or why it didn't work for everyone, but it is something that I provided these other fixes for, and feel free to try them if you aren't familiar with them or if you have any trouble with this method that I've used since the beginning. Actually, though, because of the way we're spawning them and the way that they get streamed in, we are not going to have the same results anymore. The characters are parsed differently. In fact, the actors are parsed differently so that when they're loaded into the level, it is not going to be at the same time. It's not going to be in the same order every time. And so this player 2 reference is almost never going to be valid. In fact, it's probably never going to be valid on begin play. Now, I want to cover the right way to do this, but quite frankly, there's not enough time in this episode for how much time I have to actually show that. That's going to be part of the streaming in specific actors and making sure they're ready before, you know, putting them in level and showing them the character and things like that. So because of that, right now I'm going to implement a bit of a hack, and it's actually an okay hack. You could probably, quite frankly, just keep it. I don't think it's really going to hurt anything if you keep it, because in the future, this will only run if the player 2 reference is invalid. So I added it to tick, but it's only going to do one check on tick, which is perfectly fine and won't slow your game down much at all. Definitely nothing noticeable until this becomes valid. It should be valid literally after the first update that both characters are in, that both characters respawned. So it should be very, very quick, but it's something I've added now just to make sure that we get full control of our characters despite the differences in the level streaming. So it's, again, pretty simple. Let me walk you through it. So if I add event tick, you may have it already. I actually ended up removing it because of things we did in other episodes and we didn't need it anymore. But I've added it back in here for now. Again, probably temporarily. So we get to future episodes. And I've done a very specific chain of events. So I didn't change begin play at all. It's exactly the same as it always has been. But I've done a very specific chain of events here. So I've checked if player 2 reference, that is this guy right here, this is only used for keyboard mode, and it's already a hack in itself. As far as I'm aware, Unreal doesn't have a good way to control multiple pawns using one device or one controller. So I've had to make my own custom controller system and control it that way. And you'll be familiar with this if you've watched the series. So this guy right here, I make sure that he's not valid before going any farther, because if this is already valid, then we'll have full control of our character and we won't need to actually update him. However, if this is not valid, we want to check if our game mode reference is valid. These are all validated gets. And then I want to check if player 2 on the game mode is valid. Now we know player 2 is actually the second player in the game mode because we spawn player 2 in the spawn players function of the game mode reference. At the second spawn point, at the spawn point tagged P2. So, what we want to check is make sure that player 2 is not equal to self here. And the reason we're doing this, remember, in this case, this is a keyboard mode case. So, in keyboard mode, player 1 has to control player 2. That's the way it works. We consider player 1 a character that also, under certain, other keys, can control player 2. So we want to make sure that player 2 is not equal, player 2 is equal to self to do this check, and then we want to make sure if it's not, that we set player 2 reference to this. Meaning that player 1 has access over this player 2 reference. Okay? And it's okay if it doesn't make sense. It is confusing because, again, it's a hack, and in my opinion, it's a limitation of the system. It's possible that I just don't know a better way to do it, but it works perfectly fine to do it this way. And, of course, when you have two devices like controllers or are playing online, none of this comes into play, so it doesn't hurt anything anyway. Anyway, long story short, player 2, drag off of it and do equal equal. You should select equal object. And then for the bottom node, drag off of that and type self. Get a reference to self. Drag the result into a branch, just like that. And I just have reroute nodes so that you can see the line clearly. And set this guy right here, player 2, to player 2 reference if the branch is false. That's all we do. This allows us, the reason I'm doing this, by the way, additional note, we only allow player 1 to control player 2 because if I set player 2 reference in player 2, it's going to be confusing. Player 2 is going to have a reference to itself, of course, because it's that character. And then it will also have a player 2 reference variable, which we don't want. It doesn't make sense. So we have player 1 who has control over itself and a player 2 reference, and then we have player 2 reference which has control over itself. That's why we only do this on false here. And then I call notify player locked in, which you'll be familiar with this if you've been following the series. It just calls setup input mappings, and it sets up all of our logic so we can do combos and stuff. So I can come in here, and our keys get mapped to different values. So I load in here. I can do something like the fireball. Do something like the fireball, like that. Like that. And there we go. So you can see I have all these other attacks that I can use, and the notify player locked in just gives us access to these. The reason we need to do it there is because before, this was getting called only from code in setup player input component. And I'll show you where that's at right here. In our fighter template character, where we set up the controls for the characters. I was calling notify player locked in just to make sure that the players were set up and assigned to player 1 or 2, so to determine which inputs we needed to put in. Again, this is a keyboard mode specific fix because if you're on controller, all of these commands will get assigned to both characters. However, if we're doing the keyboard mode thing, we need to do it slightly differently. So I was calling it here. It's perfectly fine to leave that there. Player 1 will have it called and the logic performed, but we need to also call this when, assuming this is the case where tick runs and tick sends the player reference here, we need to make sure we also call notify player locked in here. You won't be able to call it there with our current setup because for me, I have to find it. I should search for it because apparently it's pretty far down. But it was only a Blueprint implementable event before, which means we can call it in code and handle it in Blueprint. But we need to make sure it's Blueprint callable as well. That way we can call it within a Blueprint. So add this tiny little change right here. Make sure we can call it within a Blueprint. Again, build, whatever, open up the editor again. And then call it here. You don't need to use player 2 as the reference here. Because again, this is a keyboard mode fix. So for player 2 reference, it will need to, player 1 will need to be the one that's locking the player in here, not player 2. So just leave it as target self. And don't worry about this too much. As I said, this is really just fixes for keyboard mode, which is a hack already. And it will probably go away when we get into the manual loading in the actors by themselves, because we'll have a specific point when they're done loading, and we can know when to trigger this logic. Because we don't currently know, I've just put it on tick, and this is more just for ease right now. Some additional notes before we wrap up for the day. So, when you're looking at your world outliner, and in fact, when you need to build lighting, because the lighting, when you add these new levels to as sub-levels, they're going to need to be rebuilt, and they're going to be pretty ugly without it. So if you want to build them, when you go to do build and build lighting only, or if you just do a full build here, it's going to actually screw up and say, oh, there's multiple skylights and stuff. Since we have 2 sub-levels here, or just since we have a level and sub-levels, if multiple had skylights, then it's going to, you can't have 2 skylights in the same level, at least not normally. Might be ways around that, but normally you won't, so it'll fail, and it'll say something about, oh, duplicate skylight or more than 1 skylight. So make sure you go to, get exactly where it's at, skylight right here. So you'll have 2 of these, they'll be the same name. You can just delete one. We haven't done anything with lighting in particular yet, so this can always be adjusted later. I would just go ahead and delete one now. That way you only have 1, and then build your lighting. That way your stages look nice again. An additional note that I would add as well is now that we are using our persistent level to load everything and we're using level streaming, I would go to your project settings, maps and modes, and update the editor startup map and the game default map. Because otherwise, next time you open your editor, you're going to be on main menu, and you're going to be confused if you're anything like me. I was like, wait, why is this not working? I thought I had it working. And yeah, because I was loading back up to the main menu, whereas I need to be uploading, or I need to be loading up until into the persistent level. So just an additional note that could come in handy. Now, quickly, I'm going to do the last thing, which is the live demo for what I wanted to show you. So essentially, I have the answers down here. So 1 was going to the training room level. We can set that up now. So if I were to do this, I'm going to move this out. Actually, I won't be able to do that, I realized. Let me move this back in. And so what I'm going to do, it's going to be a little bit ugly since I'm adding this on the fly and I'm not cleaning it up, but we will put in the training room here. And one will go to training room, and we will have open or low level here with training room passed in the level name and main menu here. Okay, we can compile this and save it. And nothing will happen if we don't have that level in here. So let's go to our levels tab, add existing. And I believe this one's also in levels. It is, training room. So you can see it gets added over here. It's perfectly fine. I mean, there may be additional stuff that I don't necessarily care about in it right now, but it can always be updated later. So for now, just for an example, you can see I've added it here. I'm going to save everything. So I get all these down. Let me close out some of this so don't need the game mode. Level select screen anymore. Base character BP anymore. We'll keep that open. Don't need this anymore. And main menu is probably fine. Persistent level is fine. We don't really need it though. So anyway, once we're in here, now we have this level loaded as well. So you can see training room is also here. So because of that, it is streamed in, but it does not have the same level blueprint stuff. So it doesn't have what the side scroller example map has. I'm going to copy it and put it in just the same. I think it's perfectly fine to do this. You may need different things based on your level BPs just to change them up a little bit. But for now, it's perfectly fine to keep them the same. This is just really an example to change between maps. I can select this map and I will load into this level. And there you go. I mean, you're good to go. Then you streamed into the other level. So you're going to want to do this for all your characters, or excuse me, all your stages. So you can add your my bigger stages as well. I can add them all to this, and we'll choose which ones stream in and out. So, you know, you can have 40, 100,000 stages in here, and as long as you're streaming them in and out properly, it won't cause you any problems. So that's how quickly you can change it and add to it and have fun. Add in all your levels, and we'll go over more level streaming stuff in the near future. It's something that's gonna take time. We are gonna have to update a few of our other systems as well to make it sure that it plays well when we want to exit the stage. So if we go into the stage now, well, it doesn't matter which one we go into. Let's go into this one. And say we want to actually go back to the main menu now. Everything's going to be gone because I destroyed the camera actor. So just know that that is known, and that's why I said it'll probably be removed, but there's actually other issues that pop up alone if you just stream in the main menu and stream out the other levels without the camera. So we're going to be covering all that. It's not necessarily a problem with our system, just something we haven't actually added yet. We need more stuff. But this is already a long episode, so let's consider this level streaming part 1. I have other level streaming topics to cover, but we may also do an entire other just standard level streaming episode to kind of get everything in the right flow, make sure everything's working. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for you tonight. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for me in the channel. Anything else you can do, I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to all my Patreon members and YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you all for continuing to care about me and support this channel. I really do appreciate it. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community that is completely free, and I'd be happy to help you with any problems that you had. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.